Good morning. Welcome to the Advisory Committee meeting for the Guerra Plaza Revitalization Project. And we'd like to acknowledge today is Patriot Day, September 11th, and the meeting will commence shortly. We start with a roll call. Ms. Clerk, can we have a roll call?
Hi, sorry about that. Yeah, I'll go ahead and start the roll call. Kristen Snedden,
Here.
Chair for the committee. Thank you. And when I call your name, go ahead and just turn your webcam and audio on. Commissioner Leslie Wiscombe, the Vice Chair for the committee.
I'm here.
And do you have your video? Oh, thank you. And then next, Commissioner Michael Drury. Commissioner Michael Drury. All right, moving on. And then Commissioner Julio Wandena will no longer be joining us, so I'll move on to the next name. Commissioner Barrett Reed.
Here.
Thank you, Commissioner Barrett Reed. All right, moving on. Commissioner B.D. Longstreet.
I'm here.
Thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning. And next, Commissioner Megan Harmon.
Here.
Thank you, Commissioner Harmon.
Councilmember Harmon.
Oh, thank you. Commissioner Roger Perry.
Present.
Thank you, Roger. Commissioner Perry. Do you have video available? Oh, thank you. And then next, Commissioner Ann Peterson.
Here.
Thank you, Commissioner Peterson. And Commissioner Perry, you can go ahead and turn your video off. Thanks. Thank you for checking in. And last but not least, Commissioner Sam Edelman. Commissioner Sam Edelman. All right, that's no attendee from Commissioner Edelman and Commissioner Drury. All right, that concludes the roll call.
Thank you, Mr. Davis. And so do we have any members of the public present at this time?
We have 12 attendees so far, and one would like to make a public comment. Would you like them to make a public comment now, or would you like to save it towards the end of the meeting?
If we could find out if it's for an item not on the agenda or for the agenda item. If it's for the agenda item, then we'll have that later in the meeting.
Their hand went down, so okay. Maybe a false alarm.
Thank you. And then do we have any announcements?
Madam Chair, we do not have any additional announcements.
Thank you, Mr. Hess. And then do we have any agenda review changes?
Not at this time.
Okay. With that, I'd like to hand it over to you, Mr. Hess, to lead us through the update to the draft concept drawing.
Great. Thank you, everyone. Welcome to the meeting. I appreciate your attendance. And we have a number of things to cover today. First, I want to just address the GoToWebinar issues. As we've been sending out updates, this is primarily to the committee, by the way. Unfortunately, you can't send out an update and have the link within the update. So apologize for some of that confusion and some of the challenges of getting on this morning and in other meetings, but we'll try and continue to make it a smooth process for you all. Okay, so today I'd like to lay out our goals for hopefully the next 3 meetings. I feel like we've got a lot of momentum going on with this committee, and we're asking ourselves sort of the question of when will we be done with this concept plan? And so I'd like to give us a goal to be done by the end of the year, which is December 18th. We have this meeting, a November 20th meeting, and December 18th. So today we're going to be looking at getting some real clear confirmations on a number of the items that we've been talking about. And for those that we can't get complete confirmation on, we want to ask for clear direction. Those topics are the arcade, the restrooms, the kiosk, the trash enclosure, and the splash pad. And then, and again, as a reminder, we just want to make sure that these are being filtered through that process of the 5 vitalities. So we'll keep that going in the conversation as we address each issue. We'd also like to introduce 2 other items today. One is to talk about shade, and another is to talk about some lighting concepts. So that's sort of the synopsis of today's meeting. On November 20th, what we'd like to do is come back, in addition to some the confirmations of some of the items that I just went through, we'll also be going over a utility plan and look at the materials that will actually be on the ground in design and how that relates to that utility plan, as well as a preliminary landscape plan. And then in December, on the 18th, our goal, and it might be lofty, but it's our goal to come back with the final concept that this committee can agree to, that it is ready for prime time, as it were, for submittal to the city's just application process that would be going from start to finish. So again, maybe it's a lofty goal, but that's what we would like to do. I think we need to, I think we can do it. So with that, if I could request that, yes,
Oh,
Chair
Mr.
Sneddon.
Thank you. I just would like to mention that it would be good to reserve an extra meeting in case we need it. So if we could, we'll get to that at some point, but that if members could be aware that we may call for an extra meeting towards the end there to make sure we give everybody enough time.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you.
So with that, if I could ask that the slides start. I'm going to take on the first part of this presentation, and then RRM will continue with the slides. So our project update. We can go to slide 2.
That's showing up okay for everyone?
It is. Thank you, Leif.
Okay.
So I just want to make sure that we're all aware and reminding ourselves of the purpose statement. So De La Guerra Plaza celebrates and honors the historic heart of our city and provides the flexibility to serve our community's diverse social, cultural, historic, economic, and environmental vitality. And out of that, those 5 vitalities, social, cultural, historical, economic, and environmental, are really the filters through which we want to evaluate each and every concept. As we've talked about, each of these concepts have ripple effects. And so taking the time to make sure that it meets with all of these is really important. All right, slide 3. So just as a reminder of the topics for today, the arcade, the restrooms, the kiosk, the trash enclosure locations, a splash pad. And I want to take the time right now to also talk a little bit about parking. As you can see on the left, it says shared street. So De La Guerra Street will remain a right-of-way. That will not be going away. However, we don't know what will happen with State Street. And so what we're planning at this point is to, between Casa de la Guerra and State Street, is to really develop that plan as if it's part of the plaza, which it will be, and still retain the right of way. This will come more into play when we start talking about the trash enclosure location. But on the other side of Casa de la Guerra, between there and Anacapa Street, we really don't know the need still. We have not been able to do a demand analysis because we don't have a normal situation right now. So I think what we'll probably end up with, I'm projecting here, but probably end up with bringing in the aesthetics and the look of the plaza into that space, and it will be infused without, but it will not have the number of parking spaces accounted for, because we just don't know what that information is. So that might end up being something that we have to discover later as this project goes through environmental review. But I just want to put that out there that that's just not something that we can talk about in depth because we just don't have enough information. Just want to remind us all that it was a unanimous decision by this committee to make the plaza proper pedestrian only. Parking, as we referenced, is we just don't have enough information, and the right of way will remain. And here, I'm going to turn it over to Leaf to begin talking about the other topics.
Excellent. Good morning, everyone. Good to see you all. I'm going to run through just some more sort of recap slides. And again, as Brad mentioned, we're really here to do a touch base, make sure that we're all in agreement, that we're all rowing in the same direction. So the arcade, we talked at length last time. You can see it highlighted there. It received pretty much unanimous support from the committee, and it's going to be a really valuable feature for its historic, cultural, social value. And that'll get developed a lot more during the sort of the city's review process. The trash we talked about at our last meeting, and the takeaway there was the committee couldn't really evaluate locations because there was too many unknowns in terms of the need and the demand. So since then, Brad worked with Dan Rao to work through this calculator, which basically looks at all the sort of the business types around the plaza, and it spits out numbers at the bottom of how much volume we need to account for that theoretically would get rid of all the wheelie bins that you see sort of clustered along the edges, the fringes of the plaza. So there's kind of a lot of numbers there, but the red arrow is pointing at the bottom line. The analysis says to take care of what's there today, that demand, you need two cubic yard bins and four cubic yard bins. So pretty decent amount of trash, but we really believe that consolidating it into a single pickup point is really critical to sort of meeting many of our goals for, a clean, sanitary, pleasant smelling space really is important to all the vitalities. No one wants to hang out surrounded by trash. So Brad has spent some time talking to users, property management, Marburg, and he and I walked the site as well, looking for where we could tuck the trash. And we have two locations to share with you today. The one on the bottom right there, this idea is to put it against the blank wall in the placita, sort of in line with where the restrooms are slated to go. That could be just an attractive above grade structure. It's just around the corner for all the restaurant service businesses, and instead of needing to get a trash truck into the plaza, you could roll it out to State Street, and that's the way you could service it. So that's that one. And then Secondly, a little more interestingly, we want to share an idea or bring back an idea that we briefly brought up in a previous meeting about an innovative underground collection point in the street on De La Guerra. It's exciting to us because the visual impact of dumpsters is really problematic, and it doesn't take space away from the users. So here's an example photograph of the concept, and it needs a lot of thought and feasibility analysis that we're starting to undertake now. But essentially, all those bins you see there drop down into a vault in the ground with hydraulic arms, and that lid becomes the ground. So the only thing you see on a day-to-day basis is those little receptacles on top that are basically like drop boxes for trash. Trash drops down into the respective bins, and it can be picked up with a truck periodically, but not as frequently as just a standard trash can. So that is essentially the concept that we want to propose to you today. Lots more thought needed to figure out the nuts and bolts of it. But Brad, do you want to interject anything on that topic?
I do. I just want to clarify a little bit in that what you see over in the picture is a large roll-off. That's not what we're proposing. What we would be proposing is something more similar to the green size that you see that would also be underground. But the reason we brought up the 4-yard and the 2-yard is because those are the sizes that we would need to accommodate. So the concept here is that whether this is on De La Guerra Street or in the Placita, because it could be both, is that we would have the bins down below, and if it's a recycling day, everything comes up above ground. The recycling bin is pulled off by the Marburg folks and emptied and then put back, and then it lowers back onto the ground. If it's trash, same thing. And if it's food service, same thing. So again, the goal here is to be as stealth as possible, because there really isn't a good space for anything above ground in the De La Guerra Street area. We have looked. If we were to put this over in the Placita space, as well as the De La Guerra Street space, really it's going to end up being probably more of a function of cost and use as to whether it goes above ground or below ground. Everyone knows who's tried to build a trash enclosure in this town. It's pretty comprehensive, and they're usually very expensive. So we would be looking at the cost differential between above ground and below ground. And then really operationally, does it make more sense to have it underground if it makes sense economically? So the last part I want to say is that what we've shown is the sort of 2 drop boxes, kind of like a library drop box or something like that, where it's more waist high, whether it's on the lid or right next to the lid, and has a curved trash chute. We're not really sure yet. All of that needs to be developed, but the goal is to have something that really eliminates any ADA issues. It eliminates an aesthetic concern of having something really big. And it should be fairly clean, because what we're able to do is just give the people that have permission in that area to use those drop boxes a code or the ability to open that depository and empty their trash or their recycling. So we're pretty excited about this idea. I've tried to contact the folks, I believe they're in Switzerland, and although it's a German, might be a Swiss-German space, I'm not really sure yet, but left a message for them this morning. It's a tough time change, so we'll get some more information on this company, but there may be others in the United States that might be able to satisfy this need. So. Madam Chair, you are muted.
Thank you. Did we want to take questions on these individual items as we go, or save that? We'll be saving comments towards the end, but as we cover trash, or if there are no questions, we'll keep going.
It's up to you, really. I think that this is a new concept, so maybe it would be helpful to take some questions on this now, if there are any. But I think for sure at the end we would want to make sure that all the committee members are commenting.
Thank you. And so I have a quick question then on the decking of this. Can it be? I think you mentioned that it could be any surface almost. We could put tiling, or it could match the rest of the plaza, depending on what that is, or what is the flexibility for the top of that decking?
Madam Chair, we are trying to understand that. What we've seen on their website is that it can be designed any way we want it to in terms of fitting in, but I'm sure there's a limit in terms of weight. So if we were using stone or something really heavy, we may have some issues, but I think that as of right now, we're assuming that we can make it aesthetically match.
And then this could be both for members of the public using the plaza and for the businesses that are on the plaza. Is that correct?
I think for the people of the public, we're going to actually have trash and recycling receptacles throughout the plaza anyway. That's actually another part of this. This would be primarily for the businesses that are on the plaza.
Thank you. Councilmember Harmon?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Hi, Mr. Hess. Good morning. Just a couple of quick questions about this. First, presumably the company or companies that makes this have some fix for this, but I'm curious about what happens when inevitably the trash exceeds capacity in these bins. Is there some system that informs Marburg or whomever that it needs to be picked up early, or will it just overflow? I mean, I guess I'm just wondering what happens when that, too many people are putting too many things in there.
Councilmember Harmon, I don't know the answer to that question yet.
Okay.
We're still in the discovery mode. We love the concept and we want to figure out all those details.
Okay. Then I'm assuming the second question will have a similar answer, but what about the smells? Does this keep all the smells underground? I don't want that area to become like as someone said, a walk of trash. Will this contain those?
Again, Councilmember Harmon, I don't know exactly the details, but the idea is that you'd have a bottom plate and then underneath it, it would be a concrete style bunker with a slope on it. So if it ended up smelling, the assumption is you could wash it out to a drain and then that would get pumped out. So hopefully the smells could get contained. If you've got really smelly trash, sometimes you just have really smelly trash, and hopefully the pickup would be frequent enough so that we don't run into that too often.
Okay. Thank you. And then this will also be one of those questions, so I'll just put it out there as information that I'm interested in as we move forward learning about this option. I'm interested in understanding ongoing maintenance costs. To the extent that those are extremely high, that will weigh on my personal interest level in moving forward with a design like this. So those are the three things that sort of pop into my head, and appreciate it. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Anne, do you have any questions?
Yeah, I find this concept really promising. And looking at the landscape or the plan, it looks like this would sort of sit in front of the businesses that are already there, that Lovebird and Starbucks, is that correct? And that it would be in the street. So I just wanted to, I guess I'm thinking ahead to, this resolves the trash problem, but does it also lock us into a permanent street closure on De La Guerra Street? Is it fair to say that?
That's a great question. The concept is that it would go into the dispensers or the depositories could actually sit more in line with the transformer that's on the sidewalk. It could be directly on the lid. One thing that's for sure, though, is that you can drive over the lid. So if we were going to keep the right-of-way, and it ended up being two-way traffic as part of that right-of-way, you can drive over it.
Thank you.
Any other questions before we move on from the committee? Okay. Leif, it's all yours.
Okay, we can come back to that if anything else comes to mind. Moving on, the restrooms again was unanimously supported by the committee, that the need for them. We found what we think is a pretty good place around the corner against the big blank wall on Scott Placita. Right where there's a roof line that jumps up to a 2-story height, just where we've located it. So it's convenient for the plaza, but it's not really in anyone's view shed. We've got a little sort of simulation of roughly where it may go and roughly how big it may be. So you can see how big that blank wall is in the Placita. Just going back to our previous point, we thought the trash enclosure could sort of go right where that gentleman's standing, sort of in line with where the restroom was showing. It's tucked against that wall. There is an easement, a pedestrian easement in the plaza, in the Placita, which allows us about 15 feet of clear space from that blank wall out into the Placita. So everything's tucked within that 15-foot corridor.
And if I could just chime in here, one of the things that will be really important is the design of these. Right now, we want to make sure that everything's clear, that the concept is about location, function, operations. Does it fit within the vitalities? And then aesthetically, the design portion of this will follow. It's clearly going to need to look like Santa Barbara. It's clearly going to need to fit into the space. So rather than going through a design process with RRM and having them spend time and money on that, we really want to address the issue first before we get back into the design. Just want to make sure that's clear. Vice Chair Wiscombe?
Thank you, Mr. Hess. I just wanted to know, so are you saying that the restroom, it will be 15 feet deep? Is that what you're saying, Leif?
No, it would just happen within a 15-foot wide area. So
wide area. Okay. So what is the impact on the width of the Placita when you install the restrooms? How much clear space do pedestrians have to walk?
They will have most of what they have today, because we would tuck it into that landscape strip as far back as we can, while preserving some sort of distance off that masonry wall. But the point would be to tuck it back so that single palm tree you see right in the middle would come out in order to accomplish this. The cluster of palm trees more in the middle of the photo would remain, kind of as a bookend. But it would barely take away any of the paved space you have today, maybe a foot or two.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah. Okay, moving on. The kiosk, we've talked about this for a little while now, and when we first brought it up, it was kind of a split response from the committee. There was a lot of uncertainty about the idea in general. Then the last meeting we had, it seemed like the overall support shifted in a positive direction for the kiosk in concept. So we showed a few locations at our last meeting. The sentiments seem to be in this sort of southern end of the plaza somewhere made the most sense, and to make it feel like it tied the space together without being right on an axis, a visual axis or a focal point. So what we're thinking currently, we're looking at sort of that corner generally, and it could slide in a few different directions to tie the architecture together well. and provide visibility from State Street, which we think is very important. If it's hidden away too much, it'll probably fail. So we're looking at that general vicinity. Again, this easement that I referred to, the pedestrian easement in the Placita, plays into this in a not an insignificant way. So we want to look at siting it well, keeping it visible, and making sure we can tie into the architecture. But we really believe that this will help meet many of our purpose statements in our sort of economic vitality, social vitality. It's a real collection point and a gathering point for people, for activity. We're also noodling around with ideas about prefabricated structures or site-built to maybe allow the city more flexibility in the long term if it turns out to be an experiment that doesn't quite pan out, maybe you're able to move it or remove it, things like that. Again, no designs yet. We're still trying to figure out how the concept may play out. Splash pad. Brad and I were joking yesterday. This is a good week to talk about a splash pad. After the weekend we just had, and this has been sort of identified in this right in the heart of the plaza at one end. Like it really bookends one end of the plaza. You can see the arcade, the middle of the arcade would have an archway in it that would frame the view from that entry. It would be centered on the long north-south axis. And the idea is it really activates the back of the plaza. It's a reason to pull people in on a day that there's no programmed activities in the plaza, like the photo at the top left. The photo on the bottom left shows design intent that when you turn it off, it's completely flat. There's no nozzles above ground, so it's truly flexible plaza space whenever it needs to be. So this has been in the plan for several meetings, but we just wanted to make sure we're all on the same page with this concept still, so we can come back to that.
And Leif, if I could just reemphasize that we really want direction on this today. Part of the design of this will be a total reflection of the utility plan and the materials choices that we talk about next meeting. So having a confirmation as to whether this is a concept that we feel fits within this plaza will be really important today. Thanks.
Yeah. And then we want to introduce a couple more sort of design elements today preliminarily for the committee to discuss. The first is shade. We've had this vision of making the edges green and shady and keeping the middle quite open, because we know human behavior, people gravitate to edges anyway. So we feel like the edge along the cafe courtyards along the western side is really going to be where a lot of the activity happens on a daily basis. But, by the time those trees get to the size we've shown them, we'll all be a lot older. So we've looked at some ideas for introducing shade canopies, shade structures to supplement the tree canopy until it gets more established and create little outdoor rooms, if you will, along the edge, generally in those locations that we've showed them. So we've kind of been looking at an idea like this, which is, it's almost like a cross between a shade structure and an umbrella. It's very visually light and unobtrusive, which is a real concern with all the historic, magnificent architecture you have in every direction. It's hard to plan for adding structures in there that aren't going to distract and impact those negatively. So an idea like this we feel has some merit. It's retractable. That's a big sort of plus. So, on winter days, they can just be tucked away like the photo you see on the right. They're on a pivot, so you can adjust the angles. But it creates little zones, informal sort of rooms, so that people could gather under one or another. So that's what we're looking at. This photo shows it sort of just sitting on the ground. We would look for more of a permanent mounting system, so it was cleaner on the base. But that's the direction we're heading with that. Comment?
Ms. Longstreet has a question.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just wondering, are they completely removable if you're coming to a large event where that space is going to be programmed a different way?
I don't know the answer to that. My assumption is probably not completely removable that easily. But we could look into that. You may be able to sort of fold them up into more of a vertical configuration, so they take less horizontal space. We've kind of shown them in line with the trees, so we're really looking at that row as like a row of furnishings and awnings that's lining the plaza, and not so much in the middle. So our hope would be it didn't distract too much or conflict too much. Okay, lighting is the next sort of element we want to start discussing. Really, the lighting needs to serve multiple purposes. It needs to provide a sense of security and safety for users in the evening. It also needs to provide a mood and an ambience. Reinforce the architecture and the forms and make it a pleasant space. So no one wants to hang out in a floodlit plaza. So, but you do want to feel like, there's no deep shadows in the corners that someone could loiter in. So what we've got is we've just got basically a storyboard of different types of lighting that we'd like the committee to talk about. You see on the right-hand side there, that's what is there today, and those light poles are also in the surrounding precinct, as you're aware, and they currently sort of go around the horseshoe. So something akin to that is certainly a possibility. There's also many other sort of ways of illuminating public spaces that are very, very pleasing and effective. Top left is a series of uplights that really use reflected light to create the ambience. So that's uplighting all the trees. You can do different types of historic fixtures, like the one in the middle and the top. Bottom left is overhead sort of twinkle lights to help create almost like a ceiling that you might see in many sort of commercial patio type spaces. You can have it artistically hidden and concealed in furnishings, which don't just provide light, but they provide some architectural interest. If the benches are in a rhythm down the plaza, at night that's reinforced. The architecture is reinforced. More of a Tivoli light idea on the right doesn't really work until the trees get bigger, other than the mature trees you have in the plaza today. This idea of the pendant lights is maybe a little hard to imagine in a public space, but we could imagine something like that down the sort of dining corridor that we've got on the west side. The arcade, that's like a no-brainer, having it internally lit so it glows in the evening and provides a safe environment for passers-by. If there's any site walls or other things, you can have lights concealed in the concrete or other materials like the concealed strip. And then the bottom left is an idea that we thought we'd throw in there. It seems perhaps a bit of an oddball idea, but this is an idea you may have seen in other places, but it's lights that project patterns on the ground. In this case, it's a pattern that almost looks like dappled shade from a tree. You can get literally any pattern in the world, and you could do something almost like painting with light on the plaza, and swap out those templates periodically. But that would be a really interesting artistic way to provide light and art at the plaza.
Does Commissioner Perry have a question?
Yes, I do. I'm wondering if we're considering using the existing lighting due to its historic perspective, and then just backlighting it with something more contemporary.
That's certainly something we are considering, yeah.
Mr. Reed has a question.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Snedden. So what is the process if say we wanted to uplight all of the buildings surrounding the plaza, public and private? What is the process for achieving that? Permission from property owners, etc.
I'll defer to you on that, Brad.
Yeah, I'm not sure, Mr. Reed. We have a number of different property owners, as you know, surrounding the plaza. The goal, of course, would be to showcase those buildings. So hopefully it would be agreed upon and acceptable. As far as the process, though, I think it would probably be part of both a in-person and private discussion as well as a public review, just because it's going to be part of the public process to get it all approved. Not a great answer. I'm sorry.
No, thank you.
If I could also just mention one other thing, is that the challenge with lighting and shade is that lighting provides a wonderful ambiance during the day. But what we're trying to also pay attention to is what that same lighting would look like during the day. I'm sorry, I said the day. Lighting provides a great ambiance during the evening, excuse me. But we have to pay attention to what that same lighting looks like during the day. And if it's ugly, if it looks like just strings across or strings down a particular lane, is that going to detract from what we're trying to accomplish, which is either retaining views or highlighting buildings? If we've got a bunch of strings in the way, it looks more like a utility line than anything else. We want to avoid that too. So it's going to be really important for us to think both ambiance, safety, as well as aesthetics during the daytime.
Vice Chair Wiscombe.
Thank you, Chair Snedden. My question is, have you analyzed the lighting of the buildings surrounding the plaza and reached any conclusions in terms of any types of lighting that might work well, be compatible with the existing lighting at the buildings?
Well, I'll take a first swipe at this one. Some of this is going to be incorporating what works and what doesn't work. I think part of this is you've got existing lampposts that are up and down State Street as well as in the plaza. One question is, do we want to keep these and then, as Mr. Perry suggested, supplement? Do we want to make them taller? Do we want to make the same look but a different height? does this provide enough light, and have that analysis done as part of the environmental review? You know, we're going to have a 1-foot candle for safety in certain areas or all the way through. What else can we do to add to that? So right now what we're looking for is, are there types of lighting that the community would gravitate toward, rather than us coming back with a lighting plan and saying, this is what we recommend. Right now, we want information back from the committee as to what you think works and what doesn't work for the plaza. Does concealed in, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead, finish, I'm sorry.
Well, if we have uplighting in that picture, for instance, there's colors. Well, I'm not sure that fits with what we're trying to accomplish. There's certain uplighting that's going to make perfect sense, but there's some that might be too commercial looking. And so it's a great concept. Yes, we like it, but it has to be within the context in which we're trying to work. And that's obviously going to be up to RRM to really design that well. But some of this is really just what works in your mind's eye as you are thinking through the plaza, and what shouldn't fit. I think that's what we're after right now.
Okay, well, we've talked about two types of lighting, the security and the ambiance. And do the existing historic pole lights, do they provide the security? Or do we need more of them for security? Or do they provide the ambiance, or do they actually achieve both of those goals? I mean, I think that's part of the question here, in terms of, going back to Commissioner Perry's question about, the historic light poles. So.
Yeah, that is a great question. And I have to admit, I haven't been there at night to see what it looks like right now with the lights. So I'm making a note that's on my to-do list, and evaluating the current sort of architectural lighting that's around, I think is a really well-made point. That may help set the vision or otherwise. Regarding those existing lights, I think they certainly, in the daytime, because of the style of them, they do reinforce the historic sort of the plaza when they're not actually on. And I guess I can't speak to the light performance of them until I go and visit. So we will do that.
Okay, and the uplights, would you call those more in the ambiance category, or more in the security category, or both? They seem to be more ambiance, but
yeah, they are.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if it was a combination of uplights and the historic ones would have to satisfy the security aspect, while the uplights would be more the the historic ones are ambiance too, but adding uplights would be in the ambiance category. Is that correct?
Primarily, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, I'm not trying to pin you down. I'm just trying to get an idea. I thought it was interesting you had both. We have to consider both categories of lights. That's why I asked the question.
We really do. The lighting can make or break the space after the sun goes down, and if it's overlit, that's actually just as problematic sometimes as underlit, because it's just like you feel like you're a moth in a spotlight.
Okay. Thank you very much for answering that. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. And then I had also a question here. So the uplights, we could have combinations. So if we were considering uplights, they could be with the splash pad or with the water feature, and we still don't know what the other focal point feature might be. There could be uplighting, illuminating that, some combination. Are we planning on having benches? I would love benches myself. I don't know that we've discussed that or not. So the concealing it in furniture, I'm not sure what furnishing we've taught. Have we talked about furnishing around the plaza? That's more, okay. That was just a check-in that we hadn't. And then I think we may, as we're moving forward in this discussion, I'm hearing that we're using the word historic to mean the ones that are existing. And I think the one that's labeled here, historic, actually doesn't even look that historic to me, but I think we might want to just, as we're talking about that, we seem to be saying historic for the ones that are currently there. And then I had a question about the existing poles. Could they be, so you're saying they could be refashioned to be taller, or maybe those could be used to project light down? Or, I mean, can the function of them change, or they could be uplit, or is there, was that something that you mentioned, I think, Mr. Hess, that, or I'm not sure if something that looks like the existing pole lights could be sort of purposed in a different way?
Yes, Madam Chair. I think the best answer I would give would be that if we had a need for a taller light fixture, we would want something that would be in keeping with what's there and probably model it after that. If these are going to satisfy a need and we need to supplement it, I have no problem reusing them at all. I think it would be a great use. We don't know the answer to that yet. I mean, some of this is a technical study of what exactly is needed. And so I believe if we're going to have all the lights on, for instance, up lights and the street lights on, I think the cumulative effect is actually what's calculated for safety. But we would need to verify all of that as we go forward. We will definitely need more lighting than what we have now. I think that part of this is we also want to make it not just safe at 6 p.m., but we want to make it safe at 2 a.m. And if you light something well enough, it's a deterrent for people taking a nap there or sleeping there. And it would be, the lighting on the next slide, for instance, that is in the arches, that would be perfect for the arcade. So it's going to be a combination of lighting, and this will all have to be analyzed as to making sure that we're satisfying the safety concerns.
And then I have two more quick questions, and then Ms. Longstreet. So with the uplighting, does it preclude, say, Fiesta setup? Like, is it there are lights that are delicate you can't put heavy things on top of, or are they durable and you can program over them?
You're referring to the lights.
Uplights, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, they're made for, you can get traffic rated fixtures.
Okay.
Not to say one couldn't be cracked, but they're pretty durable, yeah.
Okay. And then I guess we'll have to consider how that fits in with the building materials and the EIR of what the surfaces are, if we're considering uplights. And then I think on State Street, I think it is important that they tie back into State Street, but as we're looking at State Street too, there may be some further considerations on State Street about the lighting along there. So I think a little flexibility in that while we're working all that out would be a good idea. And Ms. Longstreet.
I think we're going to need a combination of lights in different zones. And what really stood out to me was highlighting the buildings. At night, that's going to bring life to the area to see those buildings lit up. So that one is just a no-brainer to me. And I think the different features being highlighted in different appropriate ways. I guess I'm least impressed by the string lights and the hanging lights. Those seem to me to go with an event, not a permanent fixture at dependable lighting. So.
Excuse me, Madam Chair.
Yes, is that Commissioner Drury?
This is finally Commissioner Drury, yes.
Welcome.
I apologize for being so tardy.
Welcome. And just as a reminder, these are questions at this time. We had some comments there from Ms. Longstreet, but we'll have comments on all of the features at the end, but questions at this point.
Okay. Well, I just wanted to suggest that there is a El Pueblo Viejo lighting program, and we should certainly have that
Thank you.
folded into whatever program is being put forward by this committee.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you. I apologize for being so late.
Oh, we're happy you made it.
Me too.
May I interject?
Yes, is that Commissioner Perry?
Yes, yes.
Yes, go ahead, please.
Mr. Drury, thank you for that last comment. It's kind of in line with where I'm going. The historic lights, I don't know how historic they truly are. I know they were there in the 60s. I'm guessing they may have gone back to the 20s. And the historic perspective that I'm most interested in preserving is sort of the village of Santa Barbara that started in that exact area, that we don't lose that sense of our roots and beginning. Casa de la Guerra was the center of social life of Santa Barbara, with the Pueblo building up around it. Taking the grass away and going with the hardscape is a big start to go away from that historic perspective. I see the necessity behind it. I just want us to try and hold on to some of that.
Thank you, Commissioner Perry. And we'll have the full discussion of that. Very good points.
Moving
I think
on.
we can, yes.
Okay. So we just have a couple of closing slides. This is just showing you what we've been working on in the background. We've started to develop a 3D model of the plaza that will form the sort of foundation for our our graphic communication of the project. So we have a few just snapshots of it to show you what we've been working on in the background and how it's kind of coming together. Think of this as like, if this is a house, this would be like the rough framing. So the colors aren't representative of particular materials, but the overall scale and massing, I think is. So this is just kind of, because I thought you might find it interesting to see how it's coming along. These are just still shots from the model. We were going to try to show you the model like in real time, but it was a bit clunky and frustrating, so I didn't want to attempt that on this live meeting. But we are able to sort of navigate and move through the space and see how things are actually starting to feel from a scale perspective. We're also able to analyze where shadows are falling at different times of the day. This is oriented to the real world, so we can plug in a day and time and see roughly where the shadows will fall. And then it's still schematic. You can see that the landscaping's not very developed at all. It's just, some of these things just show what's there today. This is the existing palm tree, the existing pepper, and then just the sort of the concept of the green edges. Once this is kind of more flushed out, then we actually do a proper rendering of it. So this will sort of morph into a product that's more similar to this, which is one of our projects from a couple of years ago, Mission Plaza in San Luis Obispo. So that was on the right, you see what did look like, and on the left is the sort of rendering of the new design superimposed on it. So if you can join the dots in your head, this will end up looking a little bit more like this in terms of graphic presentation quality. So that's just a little teaser for the committee to show you what we've been doing and how it's developing in the background. And we'll all have the benefit of being able to sort of go into spaces to get a feel for the human scale of everything. Brad, do you want to take over?
Thanks, Leif. So again, I just want to reiterate the goals that, today we're trying to really get confirmation on a number of these things. November 20th, we'll come back to you with a utility plan and a more developed landscape plan, as well as materials that would be associated with those areas. And then we're hoping that with all of these confirmations along the way, that by the end of December, we will have a final concept for you to review and hopefully approve, with, of course, the caveat that if we need an extra meeting, then we can certainly take the extra meetings. I think we all work well under having a goal, and I think that today is our 7th meeting, so this would be a total of 10 meetings. Sorry, 8, 9. Be a total of 9 meetings to create this concept. So if that doesn't happen, that's okay, but I just want to make sure that we're all just trying, because we've got a good momentum going right now, and I want to keep it going. Madam Chair.
Thank you, Brad. Mr. Hess, excuse me, sorry. So I think it's really important. I think we want to hear from each committee member, confirmation on the arcade, restrooms, kiosks, trash enclosure, splash pad, and then also we'll have a full discussion on the shade and the lighting concepts. So as we go through different commissioners, if you could comment on those items, and we've had some comments on those already that I think were really valuable about the tying into the village of Santa Barbara and the historic structures, and then talking about lighting of the buildings and the arcades. I will, until I guess I see anybody popping up. I guess I'll start with some preliminary comments until somebody else comes on. The arcade confirmation, yes, I think having it lit would be a really nice addition. The restrooms, I think the location is good, and I hope we're still talking about the self-cleaning restrooms. I like the location of the kiosk. I think it's good, so if it doesn't work out or if we need to program it differently, it has a little bit of maybe future flexibility. The trash enclosure, I think the undergrounding is a really elegant idea, and if that can work and not be cost prohibitive, I think that could be really excellent. And thank you, Mr. Hess, for that work on that. The splash pad, I'm more convinced than ever that that's a good idea. And then I don't know, it could maybe even go at the other end. I don't know that we've thoroughly discussed that. I think we have, but it just occurred to me that we wouldn't want it to be an impediment to walking through the plaza or going, if there's something programmed at the arcade there, then maybe the splash pad at the other end, the one in front of City Hall, might allow 2 different programmatic things to be happening, or something at the arcade, and then you can still have something to the side to activate both. Just an idea there. For the shade structures, I like if they're not permanent. I think there was the discussion that they're raised a little bit, and so make it more permanent by lowering them. But I think that also I wouldn't want to become like permanent hardscaping of the plaza. For the lighting concepts, I think we have to be really careful not to get too modern. And I know that those are just preliminary renderings, but they look so sterile. And I'm wondering about, I know we'll talk about the landscaping in the future meetings, but if those trees could show maybe more variety, and that's something maybe we'll talk about next time, but sort of in the spirit of Alice Keck, maybe, of that we have like the highest variety of foliage and trees in Santa Barbara, and maybe we could draw that into the plaza as well. So something like that. We'll have a fuller discussion of that later. For the lighting concepts, I think it's really important that we honor that it ties into State Street. We could use that lighting in a different way, but if all of the arcade is lit, and then we have some of the existing pole type structures around the plaza, and then maybe uplighting under the water feature, something like that. That the uplighting is a feature, but not necessary all the time. I'm concerned about it sort of changing the whole feel of the plaza. Even though I really like uplighting in general, I'm just not sure on the plaza. I think we have to be really careful of really changing the feel. And that last rendering, and I do appreciate that it's not fully fleshed out. And I'm glad you showed us the example in San Luis Obispo as well to show the difference of that. But it to me, that one looks like a mall, or just like something maybe a little bit too modern and too sterile. So those are my preliminary comments on that, and we'll go through, and Vice Chair Wiscombe, and then Mr. Reed.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I agree with a lot of your comments. I'll just go through the arcade, definitely, and lighting it, I think is very important. I think Leaf called it a no-brainer, but I think that's going to be essential. The restroom, the location, and the self-cleaning feature, I think, are both very important, and that they be unisex. And the kiosk, I guess I'm struggling with that from the standpoint. I like the fact that perhaps it's not. Perhaps it can be removed if it needs to be, or relocated if it needs to be. But I'm wondering what it's going to serve. And, are we serving coffee? Are we serving popcorn? Are we, what is its purpose? And I know at the very beginning of this process, we talked about the fact that you serve food and people will come. And, so I think it's a good positive thing to have it. I like the location of it. I like the fact that if we needed to remove it or move it, that we probably could. But I just want to make sure that, is it going to serve ice cream, or, I think we need to know a little bit more about that. I love the undergrounding of the trash receptacles if it's not cost prohibitive. If it is, then we go back to a structure which in Historic Plaza, which will blend in with the architecture. And but if we can do the undergrounding and make that work, I think that's essential, because that also is great for ADA access. You don't have to worry about, anything that's prohibiting access for people in wheelchairs or that have other disabilities. The splash pad I love, and definitely has to be an in-ground feature. I think, as the city works through the splash pad, the operation of it has to be important. Obviously, last Sunday when it was so hot outside would have been perfect, and you want to turn on the water, but are there going to be specific hours when it's on, or is it, so how is that going to function? But I do love the idea of the splash pad, and I do like the location of the splash pad. I think it's most people will probably come from State Street into so they see it at that end, and you'll be able to see it from North Plaza also. The shade structures looked. First of all, I think that we can't have anything that tripping hazard. So I think there was some talk about perhaps in-grounding the base of the shade structures. They looked really modern to me, and I'm also wondering, we don't normally. It's normally better to plant smaller plant material and let it develop, but I'm also wondering if we shouldn't consider planting some more mature trees that provide some shade, and maybe not have quite so many shade structures. There were a little bit too many of them in the drawings for me, and if they serve the purpose until the trees grow up and provide shade, that's fine. But maybe we could consider some larger plant material that provides some shade. The lighting, I totally agree with you, Madam Chair. We have to tie that into State Street. Let's see.
Vice Chair Wiscombe, I just want to pause for just a second. I was remiss. I didn't ask if there was any public comment before we went into discussion. I just want to confirm that we don't have any members of the public.
Heck, I know we had a couple questions.
I apologize, Vice Chair Wiscombe. Yeah.
Okay, so first question from Mr. Donald Perkins. Do the bins compact and or is there risk of a jam? And I think this is when we were talking about the trash bins. Do you want me to keep going with the questions or did you want to address?
Well, I have a question for Vice Chair Wiscombe. What do you think should we address those questions, or do you want to finish your comments for the lighting? And
why don't I just finish my comments and then I can just go off, and if Commissioner Reed would wait to see if there's any public comment, that would be great before we went any further. I just jumped in because, just to kind of keep
I jumped in. Yeah, I didn't ask. Yes.
Let's see, splash pad. Okay, I talked about the shade and possibly from larger trees. I was on to lighting, I guess. Matching State Street. I think that's important. I like the uplighting, and I'm wondering if just an exploration point from a design standpoint, perhaps exploring emphasis on some of the paving patterns in the plaza with uplighting might be kind of interesting. That was something that I thought of, and I think that when we're considering safety and considering ambiance, those are the two keys. And I think we do have to look at the adjacent buildings and see what types of lighting they have. And we have to make sure, first of all, that the plaza is secure. And then I think, we could have some fun with the lighting, but I do like the uplighting. I think that, that's at grade and, you can walk on it, and I think it might be really interesting. Commissioner Drury's comment about the EPV lighting program, I don't know exactly what that involves, but I do think that we have the opportunity here to keep the plaza historical, honor that history with some lighting that mirrors State Street that kind of goes back to those days of those more historical days. Did I cover everything that I was supposed to? Yeah, I think I did. Yes. Okay. So that's my comments, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. And then, Mr. Reed, if we could just pause for a moment to make sure we've got in our public comments, and then we'll come back to commissioners.
Okay, so I will start with the questions in the chat box. Mr. Donald Perkins asked, do the bins compact and or is there a risk of a jam? And there we go.
That's a great question. They do have options that have a trash compactor type of bin in Europe. I don't know if that's something that we have here in Santa Barbara, but if it relates to a jam, what we would want to do is obviously work through those details to try and figure out how not to do that. But it's also when it happens, not if it will happen. What is the solution? And unfortunately, we just don't have enough information yet, but we absolutely will address it.
Thank you. Next question, Ms. Nancy Capone. Has there been consultation with the city's Access Advisory Committee?
At this point, no. We will take it as a to-do.
Okay, next question, Ms. Katie Grisani. Kudos to the committee for coming up with such an incredible plan. I continue to be impressed. I love the arcade and agree it must be lighted so that it doesn't become a dark corner for illicit activities. I am thrilled with the idea of underground trash if it isn't financially too overwhelming in the current economic situation. Also, I share the councilwoman's concerns regarding smells and would want to make sure it would and to make sure it could be cleaned, emptied often. And let's see if we have a few more questions. Ms. Betsy Kramer, has there any consideration been given to having a public poll, or what would Santa Barbara want before this proceeds too far? She has also a second question. Did you want to answer that?
We did actually have a public poll on March 9th of last year where we had a public forum and a public workshop within Casa de la Guerra's arcade area, and asked exactly those questions. And all of that information, I believe, is online on the website for De La Guerra Plaza, Revitalization. And we received numerous hundreds of comments about what people would like to see. All of that has been provided to the committee in preparation for this committee. So if there's something specific that you are after, Ms. Kramer, please let us know.
She didn't mention the recent AIA poll would be a very good example of what can and in CPA's point of view should be done. Okay, and I will open up public comment, verbal public comment. Let me turn on the timer. Okay, let's see here. Miss Edith Codwell, you would like to make a public comment? Let me unmute you, and you have 2 minutes.
Hello, can you hear me? Oh, good. Did you by any chance get the videos of the Evan Shively play structures?
Madam Chair, I did, yes, we did receive those, yes.
Because I would like to put a word in for that, because I've seen them and I've known Evan Shively for, 20 years. And they are really, his play structure was a draw at the Marin Country Day for children. And it's one of the most elegant solutions for children I've ever seen. So I would just like to put it on your purview and ask that you give it some thought, because they really are remarkably elegant, appropriate play structures for children. And I think it's important that you be aware of them. And if there's any additional information you would like about them, I'm more than happy to present it. Also, I have a business on De La Guerra Plaza, and I would, and seeing the images, particularly of the trees, I hope you keep in mind, because the windows and the architecture at the building at 8 East De La Guerra is so beautiful. I hope that it not be blocked. Those arched windows, I think, are not only historic, but again, elegant, and I hope you don't block them. And I think those shade structures look like a bus stop and are a little contemporary looking, I think, for what you're trying to accomplish. That's all.
Thank you so much for your comments.
Okay, next up we have Miss Jill Agonius. You are unmuted and you have 2 minutes to speak.
Awesome. Hi, I am super excited about the revitalization. I own a business at 25 East De La Guerra Street, which is right across from City Hall. And it's one of the few businesses whose storefront / like entryway will be affected by the construction. And we're actually a yoga studio. So I'm concerned about the noise during construction and also about not being able to access our front door. So I'm just wondering how the city will support businesses like mine during the construction.
Thank you, Ms. Sigonius. And yes, we will absolutely be addressing this. Part of this is it's going to be phased. It's not going to be an all-at-once type of construction. So in that sense, it will take a little bit longer. But at the same time, it allows access to each of those businesses, and that would be ongoing. We would have to work with all of the businesses on the plaza to make that happen. With respect to noise, there's certainly going to be rules that surround the type of construction that we will be doing, hours and a certain dB level that we're allowed to have. All of that will have to go through the process of the city review and the city approvals as to what we can do. There's definitely a balance between no noise during certain times and getting it done as fast as you can. So we want to strike that good balance and make sure that, most importantly, that all of you know what to expect to the greatest degree that we can provide you. So we would be meeting with you to make sure that everyone understands what we're up against.
Wonderful. Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, next up we have Miss Mary Louise Days. You are unmuted and you have 2 minutes to speak. Miss Mary Louise Days, I believe you are self-muted. If you don't mind unmuting yourself.
Thank you. I also find the shade structure shown as being shockingly too modern and inappropriate. It also will be important to see further details about the arcade area to see exactly how it is expected to operate. And I would like to know if the sketch plan does indicate that Caesar's Alley would be filled with trees. It is a public thoroughfare, and it's the little walkway between Stork Placita and the adjacent State Street building. Has there been discussion of Caesar's Alley?
Thank you, Ms. Days. If I may answer the question, Madam Chair. Currently, we're just showing for that area what is there. We have no plans to affect Caesar's Alley at this point because the landscaping on that south side of the Placita actually is a benefit for us for our stormwater management plan, which is a challenge. But the water naturally will head in that direction, and being able to have the water drain into existing landscaping is actually a huge benefit for the project. Additionally, that's actually outside of our scope, is that alley is not within the Placita proper, which is what we would be aiming for. The materials within the Placita will probably change in terms of aesthetics, but again, it's a pedestrian easement. So our plan is not to affect that area really in any way in the way of use. Some of the landscaping may change depending on in keeping with what we do with the rest of the space. But at this point, we have no plans to affect the Caesar's Alley.
Thank you.
And Mr. Hess, could you remind us of the date of the meeting when we had the full renderings of the arcade? And I think there are many more details on the functioning of the arcade and comments on that. If Ms. Days has not seen that yet.
It was the last 2 meetings. Ms. Days, I will make a point of reaching out to you and getting you the links to those 2 meetings so that you can review the details that we went through.
Thank you
on the
very much,
arcade.
because the public is not fully aware of these meeting dates.
Thank you.
Okay, next up we have Miss Nancy Capone. I unmuted you, so you have 2 minutes to speak. Hi, Ms. Capone, I believe. Oh, there we go. Perfect.
Oh, hello. Thank you very much. Actually, I didn't need to speak because I typed my question into the chat box and it was already answered, just about consultation with the city's Access Advisory Committee. I just feel that's so important. We need to be inclusionary of our entire community, including everyone who's differently abled. And so I think that needs to be built into the design from the beginning. And I thank you all so much for your work on this. That's all I have. Thank you.
Madam Chair, could I just comment really quickly on that?
Yes, please.
In that part of our design team actually has to incorporate all of the ADA access points within any of these designs, especially for a public space. But I just also want to let you know that I've reached out several times to the Braille Institute. We have a great connection there, so that we're taking all of these not just the rules, but actually real life situations for people to be able to get in and around the plaza safely. So we have not specifically gone to the Access Advisory Committee, but we certainly will. But we also have that in-house as well. So I just wanted to assure you that that is absolutely paramount from day one in this project.
Thank you.
Okay, and that concludes public comment. Let me switch over the presentation view to Leif McKay.
Thank you. And then I believe we were, Mr. Reed, you were queued up.
Thank you, Chair Snudden. So I'll go through the list, starting with the arcade. I think we are all in agreement, it sounds like, that the design, the location, the lighting, the functionality, it's pretty exceptional. And I mean, I just had this thought that I think something like that will inevitably, thinking 100 years from now, become a historic component in our downtown, in this plaza. And so in that sense, I think it would be good to approach these important elements that are up for consideration in that context. What is historical today is very relevant, but I believe we are on a path to creating historical resources in the future, which is really exciting to me. Trash. I think the undergrounding is a great pursuit. I like kind of the juxtaposition of we're dealing with a very historical site, but we're also incorporating innovative technologies. I did a quick search on the internet, and the cities throughout the US that are using these underground systems are getting a lot of credit as smart cities. And so I think that's, for us to be a forerunner in that would be amazing. To Council Member Harmon's comments about costs for the trash, I think that's very important to consider. I would just add that beyond the initial costs of installing and maintaining the unit, the potential long-term negative impacts for above grade solutions in terms of sight, smell, functionality, etc. I think those need to be considered, because from a lot of our experiences, trash can become a horrible ongoing problem. And I think there will be significant long-term financial benefit to offset what I would imagine are going to be higher costs compared to the above grade structures. In general, I think, especially when it comes to the trash in the restroom structures, that the fewer ancillary structures, the better. I in general don't see those by and large enhancing the historic resources currently found in our plaza. I certainly don't think they enhance all of the important vitalities, especially the historical considerations. So the size and scale of those and locations of those are tremendously important. In terms of the restrooms, so when you consider trash, restrooms, and kiosks in the same location, I think we start working against many of our vitalities. So I appreciate splitting those out. The kiosk, I think the proposed location on the plaza side of the restrooms is great. One, you're seeing a kiosk rather than a restroom structure from the plaza, which is nice. And I think functionality is much improved that way rather than putting it on the other side, the State Street side. And I agree that considering a removable, possibly prefabricated structure is great, as long as it does not compromise on quality and functionality. In terms of lighting, I think staying simple is beneficial. I agree with some of the comments that string and pendant lighting probably doesn't work here. Projected pattern lights, while that may sound pretty radical, I think that's an important consideration. I think that could be a pretty innovative way to introduce art. And it sounds like those systems can provide a lot of flexibility, so you're not just stuck with something. Primarily, I think I support uplighting that really features the historic resources of our plaza first and foremost. And so figuring out how to get there would be critical. Shade, yeah, I agree with Council Member Chair Sneddon that these shouldn't be permanent installations. I also agree. There's a lot of validity to the public comment. And then lastly, Ms. Caldwell, who spoke in public comment, I know her. She was a tenant of ours. She has got a brilliant design perspective, and it just brought to mind some of our conversations around art. I know that's not on the agenda today, but if we can figure out art installations that have a multi-use, multiple benefit purpose, I think that could be amazing. And I think considering locating those elements in either of the two placitas, I'm putting the space in between Casa de la Guerra and State Street into that placita category would be great. It could really activate that. And then lastly, stormwater management is a big topic coming through Planning Commission and Council. And I'd just like to have some discussion at some point around how we can go above and beyond implementing stormwater solutions into this project. I think this is a great opportunity, especially as we consider a redevelopment of State Street. This can kind of lead in that sense. So those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Reed. And I think on the stormwater, Mr. Hess might have some comments on that the ground under here doesn't percolate, but we'll get to that next meeting. very specifically when we talk about the ground materials. Is that correct, Mr. Hess?
That's correct. And actually, I will reach out to Mr. Reed and explain exactly where we are, just so that he understands the details that we've gone through at this point.
Great, thank you. And really appreciate the other comments as well. And Councilmember Harmon.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm going to keep my comments pretty brief. I'm in pretty much lockstep with Mr. Reed on many of the things that he said, as well as both of you who went before. I love hearing all of this agreement and excitement. The arcade, I also just love. I mean, that's one thing that really stuck out to me through this presentation. And I love Mr. Reed's framing of it as a future historic resource for our city. And I really see that way too. So I'm very excited about that. I'm also I couldn't be more strongly in favor of the splash pad. Really love that. This is going to be a center, if we are to move forward with it, if we are to find a way to make it work, I really could envision this becoming a center for families, both people that, from other parts of town that come to State Street, and for the families that live downtown. It just, to me, feels so much like something we're really missing. And it fulfills such a need for the community. So I really love it, and I'm so excited about it, I have to say. On the kiosk, agree. I really like the location. I think it's perfectly appropriate. I am in favor personally of kiosks. I like what it does, but have heard many of my colleagues on this committee through the course of meetings that there's potential for it to go wrong, or to not be effective, or to not do what we want it to do. So I really like the idea of some flexibility with that. And I think that could be a great solution, and allow us to try something out, and if it doesn't work, to move forward in a different direction. So I like where we are, where we're going with that. On the bathroom and trash, I didn't mean at all to imply by my questions that I'm not supportive of undergrounding. I'm very supportive of it. I'm very curious about it. I don't know anything about it, and I think it would behoove all of us to really think about the questions that come with such a new way of thinking about trash. And frankly, I ask those questions because I'd like to see us do it in more places across the city. And to the extent that we can, if it's energy efficient, that's another question I have. What are the implications for energy usage? Can we make sure that it's efficient? It could be something we could do in more places. So I'm really excited about it. Again, similarly grateful that we're going in that direction, and really looking forward to learning more. I do, and I think Mr. Reed brought this up, have some concerns with putting the restrooms, and I agree with Vice Chair Wiscombe, all gender restrooms, I think would be an important step. Self-cleaning are great. I have some concerns about putting the trash and the restrooms together because, that space is already a little bit, I don't know what word I'm thinking of, but, it isn't necessarily conducive to feeling totally comfortable. And I don't know that it encourages a feeling of openness and welcomeness if we put all of the less savory parts of this in one space, trash and bathrooms. It just sort of feels like we're throwing that away if we go that direction. And similarly, if we want to facilitate connection with State Street, I'm not sure it does that, to have trash and bathrooms in that sort of connection pathway. These are the formal architectural terms, by the way, that I'm using. So, that's just something that I was thinking about, but really, really appreciate the thought that's going into how we can make these most effective and cleanest and most inviting for the long term. I think that's really great. On lighting, I'll go to shade. I agree. I didn't love the shade elements. I certainly agree that we're going to need to figure out some way to get shade, given that if we put in immature or younger trees, they'll have to grow up. Vice Chair Wiscombe suggested maybe planting some older or larger trees to start. You know, I'm not an arborist, but that sounds great to me. If that's feasible, and maybe there's reasons why it's not, but I didn't love the shade structures. Not quite sure why. It didn't really fit within the vitalities as I personally had imagined them. But understanding that something will need to provide shade. So I'm willing to very much be flexible and open to that. On the lighting, I'll be frank, I don't really feel qualified to comment on what exactly we need. Personally, I think it would be helpful for me to have a better understanding of what is necessary in connection with safety. Because to me, you know, that will drive a lot of what's possible, of what we want to see. So I almost hesitate to give too many comments on what I want to see for lighting, lest it comes back to us that XYZ is necessary from the perspective of public safety. So that makes it a little bit difficult for me to really say. I loved the arcade lighting. I am a fan of uplighting, and you know, certainly not in necessarily wild colors or whatever, but I think if we do it tastefully, it can be really effective, particularly the idea of uplighting historic resources. I think that fits in line with who we are and who we want to be. I really liked that. Originally, I was not such a huge fan when I saw the pictures of the projected designs, but as Mr. Reed discussed, potentially using that as an opportunity to activate our arts community, that I'm really excited about. So I think this just goes to the point for me that I'm very open to lighting. I don't have a lot of experience with it, but I would like for whatever we choose to have a purpose, I think is really where I've come down. If it's uplighting, it's about really showing off our historic resources. If it's projected lighting, it's about using that as an opportunity to activate our arts community and to bring them into this space. So that in conjunction with public safety is really what I'm looking at and what ultimately will be where I am. But I agree, you know, the hanging pendant lights, those don't have a purpose for me in the way that the others might. So looking forward to see what comes with that. And I think that's everything. Thank you so much, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councilmember Herman. And Commissioner Longstreet. Oh, we love. Okay, so I want to make sure that we hear from everyone. Oh, there you are, Ms. Longstreet.
Thank you. I agree pretty much with everything that has been said. I think the technology will be evolving. We know we're in a longer term to get to final approval and building, and the technology is just going to get better. So for the underground trash, even for lighting, we will see changes, and we need to be ready to move on the best available at the time. The shade structures, I agree with what everyone has said. If we need a temporary type shade, I'm more of an advocate of umbrellas in color and life rather than the white kind of hoping it just blends in. Of course, we're all splash pad advocates, and that's great. The kiosk, I think, is really the only thing we're struggling with here. And I am not clear on its purpose either. Is it an informational booth? Is it a food? I don't want to compete with our already established businesses as far as food or something like that. We have a coffee shop within the block. We have probably more than one within the block. A family can go to Blenders. I mean, there's stuff there that we don't want to compete with. So if we do end up with a kiosk, I would think of it as more of a temporary trial thing than spending a lot of time and resources on it. I also agree with Ms. Wiscombe about larger trees. If that's a way we can go to make that happen, that would be better. But all the rest of it, everyone is covered, and I agree. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Longstreet. And then we still have a few committee members we haven't heard final comments from. Mr. Drury.
Madam Chair.
Yes. Mr. Drury.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Excuse me. I'm a little late to the dance, but I'll just begin and hopefully I cover everything. I'm in complete favor of the restrooms. I think that the idea is fantastic. Trash is right on point. I'm with Ms. Longstreet about the kiosk. I don't want to see that temporary or even permanent structure there at all. I'd rather have no competition with the revitalization of State Street, and I'd rather drive business to State Street. Let's see, what I've gathered is that the shade structures are not popular with anyone, and I would think that Ms. Wiscombe's idea of larger plantings and in ground right away would be the way to go. I'm a little concerned with the rigidity of the landscape program. I'm hoping that those little round green things are placeholders, and that we're going to see a little more random populations of shade trees in the middle of the plaza, because that's a very, very hot spot in the summertime. You can imagine what that would be like on a 100-degree day in Santa Barbara. It would be unbearable. And I would like to see some shade in the middle. And the other thing, I've been wrestling with this now since this started, that the arcade is a wonderful idea, but the angle of that arcade is really, to me, very artificial. And I wondered if there was a way to slightly curve it and make it a slightly concave from the plaza to the arcade, as opposed to that hard, long rectangle at an angle. It seems very odd to me. I would like to see the curve was sort of included in the curve of the plaza itself. And I'm talking about a very slight curve. I'd leave that to the architects. That would be my only problem with the arcade. Otherwise, I think that's a great idea. The splash pad is sort of a no-brainer, especially after the couple weeks we've had. What else am I missing? Let's see. I think that's it.
Lighting? Did you want to comment on the lighting?
Well, the lighting? Yes, ma'am. The lighting is we need to make sure that it conforms at least as a starting point with the EPV, and there is options for uplighting, and I think that they should be judiciously used if we're going to go that way. But I think maybe I'll come next time. I'll come on time, and I'll come with the lighting program from the HLC for El Pueblo Viejo. And I think those are my comments, unless I missed anything.
Thank you, Mr. Drury. And I think when we're finished with our comments, maybe Mr. Hess would like to come back on and remind us of what the process is after this. So after our sort of concept portion, then it still needs to go through the full city process. And I would expect, this is the heart of EPV, so I would expect that it would need to comply with everything. So I really appreciate you bringing that up and bringing that back to our attention. And I'm happy to hear that there is an uplighting contingency in that lighting plan. So that's very helpful. Thank you. And have we heard sort of final comments from Commissioner Perry and Dr. Peterson, please.
Thank you. A few comments. I'm happy to listen to the discussion. I do agree with most of it. I'm not as familiar with splash pads. I hope to learn more about it as we go along here. From the layout that we've received, it's so enormous, and it's such a huge feature. But I think I understand that it won't be on all the time, so it still will provide for flexible use of the area. I also just wanted to ask about, sort of the environmental sustainability of that, since we've had so much trouble with drought and having to turn off public fountains often, and we are also sort of reluctant to use grass for that reason. So I'd like to hear a little bit more about how this water is recycled and conserved. In terms of the shade canopies, I get it. The shade canopies look like they're going away, but I wanted to make one small pitch, and that is that when I first looked at it, the structure for suspending those canopies does look so modern and just like it doesn't fit, and the canopies do as well. But when I really looked at the canopy style, it does reference a 1920s shade structure that was used in El Paseo. And they did drape canopies between the buildings in the Paseos, and we have several historic photos of that. So I wonder if there's a possibility, I'm happy to share those photos to salvage that idea with a different structure for mounting. And definitely, I had the same reaction to another speaker about this plan looking like a series of bus stops. But I wonder if there's a way to have just a couple, and maybe they're a different size, maybe they're sort of more organically shaped, and I can provide those reference photos, because I know buying full-size shade trees is incredibly expensive. Also, with lighting, I do agree that the pendant lights and any string lights seem more like a special event lighting. If there's a possibility that lighting would like to, the city would like to be able to use that for any special events, or have that be a possibility for a special event setup. There is a precedent at Casa de la Guerra for having string lights with paper lanterns around it. We have historic photos, again, from the early 20th century of family parties in which they use that type of lighting. It looks beautiful. We actually, that's the historical reference that we use for the string lights and lanterns that we put up when we do events at Casa de la Guerra. So I'm happy to share that as a reference photo as well. I also like the idea of uplighting the buildings and as a way to feature that historic architecture. And the patterned lights, I know them as Gobi lights, so maybe that's a brand name. I agree there's a lot of potential there. I was thinking about it in terms of, also, I think the filters can be swapped out very easily so that you can create different patterns, different colors without a lot of effort or expense. I was thinking about it in terms of historical references and commemorative events throughout the year. It could even be a version of the State Street Flag program, but done with lighting in the plaza. And maybe it's sort of a different series of events. It could relate to the activity in the plaza. But I'd love to see some historical storytelling references to history of the city get woven in to that lighting project. And let's see, I think that was most of my comments. I really am optimistic about the underground trash enclosure. I do think about the expense, but it seems like the most aesthetic solution for that challenge. Thank you.
Thank you so much for those comments. And then if I could ask that Mr. Hess reach out to you, and I think we'd all be interested in seeing more options for shade structure or shading along there that tie back into historic references too. That's a thank you for that and the offer to share those.
Yes, Madam Chair, I will reach out.
Thank you. And Commissioner Perry.
Very short and sweet. I'm very impressed with the consistency of comments and concerns. I share it on the kiosk. I just as soon not take business from State Street. I don't like the idea of the shade cloths. Everything else is wonderful, and I just ask that we preserve a historic perspective as we're trying to.
Thank you, Mr. Perry. And I think, have we heard from all commissioners present this meeting? I believe we have. Do you, Mr. Hess, have specific questions for direction from us? Or actually, before that, I did want to have a few more comments there about that. It's the next meeting that we're talking about landscaping, possibly, and I just wanted to put in there that I really would like to see a variety. I think a variety is what makes Santa Barbara what it is in terms of the greenery and the trees through there. And I think maybe a little patch of green on the ground level throughout or around the bases of those trees. I'm not hardscape going right up to the bases. I think would be nice. And then I think we need some further input for the lighting. I think once we maybe see some more options, or do you feel you have enough to go on with our comments so far?
Madam Chair, I think we have a lot to go on, but I also think that when we come back at the next meeting, I think we'll want to refine based on what all of the committee members have said. I think what we'll do is refine choices down and options down, develop some ideas a little bit better so that we can get clearer direction the next time. I think that'll be a part of the landscape plan too, clearly. I believe it was mentioned that mature trees are very expensive, and depending on the tree, sometimes they don't take very well. So it's kind of a gamble sometimes, but I think we need to look into it. I think what there are two questions that I think we still have. One, in terms of shade, it's a challenging topic because we want shade, but we don't really want to see the thing that's giving us shade in terms of the structure. Umbrellas are great, but they're also a little bit more temporary in nature. So it creates someone to actually deal with them on a daily basis. So there are operational concerns that we need to address as part of this. Having a shade structure, I'm not sure if there's one that actually could fit within the expectations of this committee, and that's fair, but it does allow for us to leave it up permanently or semi-permanently without having an employee deal with it every day. So there are certainly some operational concerns that we need to address as we consider that topic. I also want to address sort of Committee Member Drury's comment about the open space in the middle and shade. So providing shade in the middle of this will do a number of great things, but it will also detract from every view of the historic buildings that we also want to highlight. So there's such a balance within that. And I think this is just one of those topics that's going to need to be ongoing, is how important is shade in the middle relative to the highlighting of the buildings, and where does that fall from the committee's perspective? So I think we'll bring that back up again in the next meeting, and we'll definitely reach out to Ann Peterson with respect to the historic photos and those, so that we have some reference point from which to work. The other topic, I think, is the kiosk. I think that there was enough of a concern of a no-compete that we need to look at the different options of more of a temporary type prefab structure that could be either removed or, completely if it doesn't work out, or maybe we decide not to do this idea at this point because it's not unanimous. So I think we'll decide, we'll look at the notes, make sure that we're all, as a design team, taking those comments into consideration, and we'll come back next meeting with some recommendations. You asked about process. So as you noted, this is a concept plan. The formation of this committee was really about having a number of different perspectives from all of the different groups that oversee these projects. Our governing board is Historic Landmarks Commission. So we will be going through the process once we have this concept plan that everyone says, okay, it's going to change because it's going to go through the process, but this is a plan that we all agree with based on the purpose statement. It meets our expectations. It meets what we think the community needs. It takes all of those considerations into that design, and now it needs to go through the public process. So it's basically creating a concept plan like you would with any other project with an architect to say, okay, now we get to go submit our application, and it starts really from the beginning. So there will be public review, there will be public hearings, there will be the entire process, an environmental review. All of those things have to happen, but this is just the beginning of that so that we start with a real head start. Does that answer the question, you think?
I think it does. Thank you for clarifying that. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, and Mr. Reed.
Yes, Chair Snedden, I had a thought on the kiosk, and I think Councilmember Harmon maybe brought this up at an earlier meeting, but rather than an informational kiosk or a food and beverage kiosk, which would inevitably compete with the surrounding businesses. I'm just thinking in terms of the landscape, maybe a lack of color in the plaza. If we considered that kiosk to be some type of floral stand, it could bring such warmth and charm to the plaza and to that location. It softens the restrooms, and it could be incredible. I mean, people love that at the farmers market, and it could just be something there on a daily basis. So just a consideration.
I'm glad you bring that up, and I think it could also be a farmer's market stand too, fresh things to eat that aren't in competing with what's around. And I think the programming of what's in that kiosk is something that matters and maybe could be flexible. I think it sounds also like the committee's leaning towards that not being a permanent type structure, but having the flexibility. And then I guess I have an additional question as we're considering it, is if it could be movable. And so maybe we're going back to the idea of a kiosk that, I don't know, has the movable potential, but maybe not. I don't know. But the programming of it, I agree, Mr. Reed, that is a wonderful idea with the flowers or something that is non-competing, but still draws people into the plaza. So does that give you, Mr. Hess, enough to continue? Okay.
Yes, it does. Thank you.
And I think with that, if you have what you need for our next meeting, and if you could remind us the date and the topic of our next meeting.
Yes. And before doing that, I just want to, again, commend this committee. I really appreciate how thoughtful all of you are with each of these items. I think you understand the gravity of your role, which is huge. This is a really important project for this community, and it's exciting to work on. And at the same time, there's some pressure. This is an important space, and we want to make sure we get it right. So thank you. Thank you, Lee, for putting those up. November 20th, we really want to look at materials as well as coming back with some recommendations on some of the topics we've discussed today. We will have a utility plan and a more developed landscape plan. I know this was brought up by Mr. Perry outside of this meeting, but we received a preferred layout from Old Spanish days that will be a reflection of the utility plan. So we're putting that together and trying to figure out what the best plan is for the utilities as it relates to not just them, but for the plaza as a whole. So we'll be showing that as well. And then December 18th, as we already talked about, hopefully, fingers crossed, our final meeting. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Hess, and thank you for your work. Yes.
One more thing. We are going to try and make the next two meetings longer. Right now, it is 10:35, so we've already actually gone over 35 minutes. My apologies to everyone, but thank you for your patience. We will plan on about a 2-hour meeting in the next two. Hopefully that will work with your schedules, but you'll see that reflecting in the calendar invite.
Thank you. And thank you to the committee, and thank you, Mr. Hess and those who are working on the plan. Thank you. With that, we are adjourned.